In today's video, I'm going to be doing a tier list. I haven't done one since I think it might have even been the first week the game came out, maybe the second week. And since we just got Obscurus and it's going to be at least a couple weeks before we get another card, I thought now would be a good time. And also, obviously the meta has, uh, shifted and developed immensely since then. And instead of doing like a typical like tier one, tier two, tier three, or like SAB tier type of thing, I'm more going to address how often the cards are played along with how good they are. So that way you can have some kind of idea what you should be investing your resources in, and you're not investing in commons, rares, legendaries that might be suboptimal, and just also kind of talking about the meta at large, incidentally from talking about the cards. So first things first, there's only three cards that aren't on this list that are currently in the game. That's Baby Manticore, McGonagall, and Obscurus, which are all obviously heavily played cards. Manticore is fantastic with Bellatrix. It's great with Snape. Um, I'm sure it has other uses. They're just fantastic to use with Bombastic Bombs, which is everywhere because summons are everywhere. Um, and then also with Bellatrix and Snape, they both like to run Bludger because one, it provides multiple hits for Bellatrix, and then also if you're making copies of yourself with Time Turner, then you don't have to move as much to hit it back. And you know, Baby Manticores is just a good card with Bludger, so you also don't have to move as much. So um, McGonagall is obviously great for controlling the board. Very strong in Hermione and Newt in particular because Newt can stack up one cost cards and spam the board. And then Hermione obviously is just chaining cards all the time because, she's constantly making things cheaper and you can, hide her in the nebulous. So McGonagall is just fantastic card for board control, transfiguring the opponent's entire board. Then every time you play a card, transfiguring it again. And so she's also heavily played. And Obscurus obviously is the newest card we just got. It's also heavily played, and also because it's very good in Snape and Bella and Hermione. So with Snape, since you're buffing your basic attacks with Kevin, you are basically in for a really powerful Obscurus. Bella provides more ticks. It's a way to close the game. And also, you can spawn Death Eaters on the opponent's side if you time it well enough, because you'll be on that side of the board whenever your Fallen meter gets to the appropriate level. And then obviously, Hermione just has another way of dealing more direct damage with Obscurus, even though it's not as commonly played in Hermione. It definitely has a spot there. So, with that being said, I'll just address the cards that are now present here. All right, so continuing on. I'm just gonna grab them as they, appear top to bottom. So Confringo is obviously a played card. I wouldn't say it's heavily played, but it's definitely played. It's a good card, good for board control. Works well with Bellatrix. You can Incarcerus, Confringo, snipe a bunch of stuff, get a lot of ticks down. I think it's even better in duo just because there's so much stuff in duo, so it's really hard to not get the value out of it in duo. But yeah, just a played card, a good card, but it's not a meta staple, which is why it's in played. Whomping Willow, I'm going to put under lightly played. Now, that's not to say that it's a bad card. It's just not a card that sees a lot of play, at least at the moment. Completely fine in Neville. I'm sure it's got more uses, but it's just you can go a day without saying Whomping Willow, right? It's just not a meta card. Nothing wrong with that though. Unicorn basically is only played in Neville. It's not even always played in Neville. It definitely is not terribly strong. It is fun to play with Neville, but definitely not meta. It's definitely nowhere near close to meta. This is low on the priority list for card investment. A Rumpant, I think people are sleeping on a Rumpant a lot. I'm gonna put it in played because it really should just be more played. But most of the time we see a Rumpant is because it's a one cost off a Newt. But Rumpant is a very good card, and I would never feel bad about upgrading it. But it is kind of niche. I mean, it really belongs in lightly played, but it is good. Glacius Maxima again, lightly played. It's outside of Twins. It's just we don't really see it at all right now, and even then, it's just it's pretty lackluster. There might be a deck in the future where it sits a lot better, but This would be very low on my priority list for upgrading for epic cards. It just isn't used that much. Foopers is definitely a played card. It's definitely not a staple, but it's definitely good. Especially, if you just run a typical summon deck and you got your bombs, you can control the board, deals a lot of damage. You get two units that are, kind of spread out, so they're hard to, deal with effectively sometimes. Definitely in the played section. Swelling Solution, I would also put in the played section. Great with locomotors and bombs, great with Snape. Um, Pretty much just Snape and summon decks in general. I think it's deserving enough to be in the played category. It's definitely not like a hard, ever-present meta card, but it's definitely in the game quite a bit. Accio, same sort of thing. Accio is definitely a played card, mostly in Snape, but it has its uses, getting annoying companions in the back to the front, so you can actually deal with them effectively, like a Kevin or a Cassandra. Expulso might be like the best card in the game. It's like definitely way up there. Um, you're almost never going to not see this card, and that's because it interrupts Crucio, interrupts Orb of Water, trades favorably with Pixies. Just really versatile, does a lot of damage in Harry. It's a great cycle card for Hermione, great cycle card for Harry. Um, it'll just lower the cycle overall in your deck. You can get the burn damage at the end of the game. It's just a fantastic, highly, highly versatile card. Really, really good. Phoenix right at the moment is lightly played. I would not be surprised if it changed to just being more common. Um, Hermione, no, not Hermione. Harry. It'll keep you around longer, so you can just continue to fling spells and close the game with direct damage. Sometimes you see it in Neville. I think I have seen it in a few Snape decks actually. I think it's just gonna, kind of always be a little fringe, but it's definitely a good card. And but again, it will be like low on the priority list for a lot of players for boosting. Um, Broomstick, that is heavily, heavily played, mostly because it goes with the Pugno. So it's always going to be in Hermione decks, which means you're always going to be running into it. It's a great way of dodging attacks. Most notably, Whizbang is like the easiest, thing to dodge with Broomstick that comes to mind. Um, just a highly versatile card, deals damage, gets you out of situations, and it's a good low cost cycle card. So it's just not going anywhere anytime soon. Niffler is heavily played. Again, another low cost card. Notice that everything heavily played so far costs two, and that's for a reason. It lowers the curve of your deck and ramps you. So if you're playing Newt, it's even like more ramp. It's just kind of insane. When Flitwick comes out, if you end with in descending order, like let's say it's 5-4-2, you'll get two Nifflers, which is really crazy. So just a great card. Expelliarmus, I want to say, oh, this is Stupefy, excuse me. Stupefy is probably just played, even though it's a fantastic card in Harry, obviously. Outside of Harry, it almost sees no play, but it's definitely wortworthy, hits like a truck, and yeah, it's just fine. Ashwinder is one of the most played summons, but it's obviously not like in almost every meta deck, but it's one of the best summons in the game. It's cheap. It has its own uniqueness with making little miniature versions of itself that fling at your opponent when you play cards. So obviously very good in cycle decks. Just a good card. Fire Crab, I would say Fire Crab is played. If this was maybe 2-3 weeks ago, I would have said lightly played. But again, it serves a lot of the same purpose as Willow. It's just that it's also it tucks itself whenever there's no enemy around, so it can absorb a lot of damage in that form, especially from Thunderstorm. So it's definitely a good card. Incendio, I would put heavily played. Just great AOE for summons, for companions. Great burn damage at the end of the game to close it out. Just a versatile card, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Ventus is lightly played. The only person I see play Ventus is Red, and it's garbage. And yeah, it's just not a very good card at the moment, but maybe it'll have its day one day soon. But again, low on the priority list. Pixies, I would put heavily played. Pixies are just absolutely fantastic. If your opponent doesn't have a cheap way of dealing with them, like Expulso, then they're gonna get some value. They get great value with bombs. They get great value with Swelling Solution. Again, if you're playing Flitwick in the future and you go like 6/5/3, you'll get 6 pixies for the cost of 3. And so it's just a staple summon, not to mention that they're aerial, so they do very well against ground units that can't interact with them. And they just get a lot of damage in. Thunderbird, same kind of situation as a Rumpant, where it's better than what people think it is, but you usually only see it when they're one cosplaying from Newt. But I think Thunderbird is completely fine. I mean, technically, as of right now, even though I think it should be played more, it is technically lightly played. There's nothing wrong with the card. Great way to protect summons. Very strong in Newt, obviously, when you get them for one cost. Fiendfire is definitely lightly played. I think there's probably some really good Fiendfire brews with Hagrid where you could put them in played. But as of right now, it's just not really anywhere on the meta. I don't even know the last time I heard the word Fiendfire in the game. It's been a week or two. It's just takes really low precedent, right? All right, Egg, I would definitely put it as played for sure. It's almost even heavily played, but people love to play it Neville. People love to play it Hagrid, and it's always going to be just in and out of the meta. And it's a fantastic card if you can actually get it to hatch, obviously. But again, it's also kind of low priority because it's not as just throwable in all these decks. It's it has a niche purpose, right? All right, Metagut is heavily played. It's one of the best summons in the game because it splits and then splits again. And so if you can sneak another summonable like in front of those splits, then you're just in for a lot of damage. So it's really good with News, really good with Bella for getting the damage in. It's just a not so easy to deal with summon, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to be ever present. So don't ever feel bad about upgrading Matagot. It's a fantastic card. Antipodi Opali is played. I wouldn't call it quite heavily played just yet. I think that's because it's squishy, but it is just thrown in a deck here or there. Perhaps if your opponent has a good echo for it, or if they're playing Hagrid. We all know this card. The range on it's really strong. It's just kind of squishy, but if your opponent catches you without a solid answer, it'll be a problem. Portis is heavily played, and that is because it is a cheap cycle card to go with Hermione, and that's basically most of the use. And also, you can stick it in your opponent's Nebulous, so that way they can't hide from your Thunderstorm. So it just has obviously more utility with like even the Dragon Egg, getting it behind your opponent, stuff like that. You can dodge stuff with it when it teleports you away, gives you a little shield. It is just a very versatile card, and again costs 2, and that makes the 4th card out of 7 that are 2-cost versatile cards. So that's why they're heavily played. Got the name of this card is like Akame or something. Garbage. Basically never played. Not gonna get into it. Aguamente. It's played. It's good in Bellatrix for getting multiple hits. Could be good in duos. Again, kind of the same thing as Confringo, where you always have something to hit, right? It's not like super played, but I do see the occasional Hermione play it, but it'll always be in and out, and it's not as rare as the things in the bottom tier. So Bombastic Bombs, obviously it's heavily played. It's one of the most played cards in the game. You just get the extra hits for Bellatrix, you get the extra hits for damage. If you're running Locomotors and your opponent is as well, but you have bombs and they don't, then you're gonna win. And so it's almost forced a meta where bombs go with summons and then even potentially Swelling Solution, so that way you can out DPS your opponent. Bombs is just incredibly powerful. Never feel bad about upgrading the bombs. Inflatus is heavily played, super good. Stuns companions. It'll get Ron out of the way. You can stun something, so you can Crucio it, do whatever you want to do to it. Whiz Bang. You can stun something so that Death Eaters can get more value out of Crucio. You can stun something so your summons can swarm harder. Just stunning in general is really strong, and Inflatus is a great way to do it. Not to mention Avada Kedavra decks, which are ever present. So, Three-Headed Dog is heavily played. It's sometimes played in Harry, almost always played in Hermione for the same reasons. There's a lot of crossover between those two decks. Just spamming a lot of cheap cost things, and then you get to play a free summon. So why not? It's definitely heavily played. Will always be part of the meta, most likely. Monster Book of Monsters, I'll just put under played, even though it's not super crazy played. Some people that run Bellatrix try and play these, so that way you get more attack ticks off. And then you might see it in an occasional Newt deck. It's pretty good with bombs, obviously. It's pretty good with Swelling Solution. Um, might even be decent in a Hagrid deck. Who knows? But definitely not on the priority list, but it's definitely more played than the things below it. All right, next up we have Thunderstorm. Obviously, it's heavily played. Hermione Thunderstorm is one of the most iconic decks in the game. It's never going to go anywhere. It's always very good. Thunderstorm is also used in Bellatrix to get multiple hits, so you'll never not see Thunderstorm in the meta. It's always going to be around. Never feel bad about pulling it, investing into it. Just a fantastic card. Troll is definitely lightly played. I think I've seen like one person play Troll in the last like month. Um, might be slept on a little bit. There might be some use case for it. I think that when Wizard Chess Pieces comes out, and it's also a 5-cost summon, you'll basically never see Troll. But yeah, it's definitely very low on the priority list. Priority is definitely heavily played, and it's mostly to use the same spells that are also in heavily played again for cycling. And also, it's very, very important in Time Turner decks, so you can make multiple copies of yourself with Snape or Neville and such. So yeah, just a very, very versatile card. Very maybe versatile is just the best way to put it, but yeah, it's very powerful being able to use the same spell again, especially if your opponent doesn't know you run priority. So let's say you like use Expulso, then they use Orb of Water thinking that they're okay because they just saw you use Expulso, but then you use priority, copy Expulso, things like that. So it's just very strong, very versatile card. It's not going anywhere. Vada Kedavra, while it's not heavily played at the moment, I think it is heavily played at the top level, and it's just a really insane, really insane card. It's my least favorite card in the game, if I'm being honest. I think I accidentally cropped a little bit too much tier list off. Oh no, I didn't. Okay, just wanted to make sure. But yeah, Avada Kedavra is kind of just ignores what the actual game is supposed to be and kind of plays its own mini game inside the game. I really wish it wasn't in the game, if I'm being honest. But yeah, Avada is definitely heavily played, always will be. It's always going to be in the meta. So it's just something you got to deal with if you don't like it, like myself. Cyclum Sempra, I'm going to go with heavily played. It is way too good at dealing with summons, especially locomotor statues. I think Cyclum Sempra is really strong. Um, you can basically just throw it in anything and it'll do a good job. So the versatility on it is not maybe not the versatility because it only has one purpose, but the ability to basically throw it in with almost any echo is definitely there. Locomotors are definitely heavily played. I think that's going to dwindle over time. I've already seen uh, the play rate diminish a little bit, just in my own games, but over time it'll not be as good and people get better and better at dealing with them. But for right now, they're definitely heavily played and they're definitely strong. But we all know this card. Not too much to go into it. Um, Time Turner, I would say, is just played, not heavily played quite yet. Even though Snape is definitely has a higher play rate at the moment. But I mean, if it's played, I mean, it's probably like almost at the very top of played, to be fair. But very versatile. One of my favorite cards in the game. It's so flavorful. There's so many cool things you can do with it. Again, with Snape, with Neville, it's just a very interesting card, and I like it a lot. Orb of Water is definitely heavily played. I don't know if this will always be the case, but Hermione is almost singularly responsible for this card's play rate. But it's good for cleaning up the board. Does a lot of damage. When you play Orb of Water for 3 mana, it's kind of crazy. Definitely good. Subtle on Apparition, I'm gonna go with played. Very good in Neville. It's good in a lot of things, to be honest. I think it's just going to keep being more and more played as time goes on. The ability to dodge attacks, getting a teleport after you use it, slightly healing. I think it's a little undervalued at the moment, but it's definitely a good card. Incarcerus is heavily played. Almost a lot like Inflatus. It's just that you don't get the stun effect, which is why Inflatus is probably always going to have a higher rate. But the area that you can grab is a lot bigger and yeah, obviously you can pull it together multiple targets. So it has its purpose, but it's basically like slightly worse than Flatus in my opinion. Um, Tebow's Assault, I'm just going to go with played. One, because we're always going to see it in Newt, obviously. And then it's played in the Dabi Avada Kedavra deck a lot of the time because you basically get everything to follow you. You teleport to the other side, and then you can Tebow's Assault and clear the way. So it's just great for clearing ads and companions. Howler is lightly played, but I think it'll eventually work its way to just being more played. I think it's a fine card. Its just play rate is not very high right now. Thunderstorm or Atmosphere Charm, excuse me, I think is heavily played. The single target damage is really high on it. It forces your opponent to move, which is really important. And it's just a good card. Applies good pressure, does good damage. So there it is. Protego Totalum, I would say, is lightly played, even though I think as the game goes on, it's going to be seen a little bit more. But yeah, it's definitely not on anyone's priority list. I mostly see it in like Snape or Neville. Basically, you're trying to, anything you're trying to protect. So with Snape, it's obviously your time to earn copies. You can get more value out of shooting off the Septum Sempras. And Neville, you're basically nullifying the incoming damage via spells most of the time. So that way you can continue to heal. But there it is. Essence of Dittany is probably just played. But again, if you have a summon deck or if you have Neville, which is basically a summon deck, then you're doing just fine. It's the only card in the game that AoE heals, so it's always going to have its uses, but nothing too crazy. A Pugno is definitely heavily played because again, it's a 2-cost card, does a lot of damage, and helps you cycle. So it's great with Hermione, it's great with Harry, it's great with Bellatrix because it also does all those hits. So just very, very, very strong card. We have what is the card called? Like Fireworks. I don't remember what it's called. But yeah, it's very lightly played. I don't even know the last time I saw someone play this card. I think it's pretty bad. Not much to say there. Pretty low on the list. Whizbang is definitely heavily played again because Hermione playing Whizbang for 4 is kind of nuts, and that's also just an ever-present meta deck. Spiders lightly played. Spiders are basically almost. I don't even know if I've ever seen spiders not played in Fiendfire, and outside of that, it's just very rare. Very low on the totem pole. Snowball, I would just go under played, mostly only with Harry, but maybe even lightly played because not even all Harry decks play it, but somewhere in there. Hits like a truck if you can get it to connect with something far away, but again, low on the priority list. Monster Book is heavily played. It's might be it's either like the best or second best summon in the game right now. I think just the ability to continue to apply the pressure, sneak into the nebulous. That's really its primary focus. This makes it incredibly strong and useful for summon decks. So quite crazy. Bludger, I would go with played. It's almost heavily played, and again, that's because of the Snape and the Bella. Tripsky is probably lightly played. Again, it's just kind of niche. Probably good in a Hagrid deck. Might have some use in a Neville deck. It's actually, well, actually, I take it back. It's probably played just because it isn't a lot of Vada Kedavra decks, just so they can continue to stay around long enough to cheese you out of the game. And then we have Nebulous, which is heavily played. Again, it's a 2-cost spell. Hope you guys see the theme by now. Hiding from your opponent's summons while you do more damage. It's just cheap cycle card. It heals. It's just insanely versatile for 2 mana, and it'll always be part of the meta. What do you call these things? Scroots. Those are last. Blast ended Scroots. Yeah, these are last tier. Very lightly played. I don't even know if I've ever had one. I think I've had like 1 or 2 summoned on me since the game started. It's not very good at the moment, sadly. I know Flitwick later metas tries to summon 2 of them, but I don't know if that's even worth it. Centaur, I would put as lightly played, though I do think in certain decks he can make it up to being played. It's just that he is so squishy, and so yeah, almost no one plays him. Acromantula Nest, again, I think that's lightly played as well. I think it's predominantly good in Neville. especially when you combine it with bombastic bombs. It's a great way of answering locomotors with Neville. But outside of that, you're almost never going to see any play from it. But it is a good card um, when the deck suits it. Crucio, I would put it as played. I wouldn't quite put it heavily played, but it's a good way to close the game. Interrupts Ron, has a good stun effect. Great way of answering Antipode and Opalize, especially if they're way higher level than you. Tego Diabolica, I think, is lightly played. It just sucks to have to stay in one spot. You can get thunderstormed, you can get venomed, you can get swarmed by summons, and you can't go anywhere unless you want to lose value on the 5 mana you just spent for it. Very cool, beautiful card. It's just don't know if it's particularly worth it. It's a lot easier to get off in duos, obviously, but yeah, just not very played. Ivy, I would consider that heavily played. Just great for getting rid of opposing Rons, whatever the opposing companion is, as long as it's not, like Frey Twins. Um, Great card. Sometimes you even hold out for like a dragon, like a Ridgeback, an Opalai, something that your deck's having trouble with, and you can basically mitigate like 6+ mana from your opponent. Daniel Page is lightly played mostly in Neville, but he is very good for setting up the Neville wall. Frey Twins, I would put under heavily played. Um, Provides multiple hits with Bellatrix, getting basically 2 units, quite strong, helps with Glacius Maximus combinations, good with bombastic bombs. Just strong to get multiple things. Guarp I'd put under played, not quite heavily played, but played enough. Just having basically a little tank that runs around and provides some stun. It's never going to be bad. Hagrid I would put under played right now, but he probably jumps in between heavily played and played. Pretty good in Nevada Cadaver decks, just for sustainability. Um, not much to say there. I wouldn't feel bad about upgrading the Hagrid. Hermione, I would put under maybe at the moment heavily played, but she'll probably go down to just here and there in the future. But right now, she's very good in Bellatrix. She's obviously very good in Hermione copying a spell. So right now, I put her under heavily played. Kevin, right now, I'm just gonna put him under played because really the only meta deck he's played in is Snape, even though he does also work with Neville. But if it wasn't for Snape, he would be under lightly played. And yeah, the recent Snape being in the meta will buff them a little bit. Venom, I'll put under played. It's not quite a staple, but it is ever present. Just a good card for sniping companions, units that don't move very well. Yeah, just a good card. Cassandra, I'll put under heavily played. Never feel bad about upgrading Cassandra. She's very important for a lot of strategies. It helps you survive against summon decks and can be a real problem if your opponent doesn't have a way of dealing with it, like maybe with an Accio, something like that. It's just she can be quite troublesome, especially in Neville decks. This is like the worst card in the game, I think. I'm pretty sure. I don't even remember her name. Um, what's her name? Yeah, that's how much she doesn't matter to me. Yeah, just complete garbage. Not much to say there. Lottie, I'd put under play. There's an occasional um, deck where it's nice to ramp a bit. Some Haggard decks like to use Lottie to really snowball. I mean, she's really probably like lightly played at the moment, but I think she has more potential. Uh, Malfoy is definitely played. Good in Simon decks to help swarming with bombs. Good in Bellatrix to get multiple hits. Good in Glacius Maxima decks because you get multiple wizards. Ron obviously is heavily played. His ability to clean up the board is quite strong. Most decks run some kind of out to him, whether it's Inflatus, Crucio, whatever, because he's just that strong. Glacius is played, does well against locomotors as well against summons, but it's not played enough to be, you know, uh, like a staple in the meta. And now we have Expelliarmus. I would just put it under played, just because Harry is pretty much the only deck using it right now, but it hits very hard, and it's just always going to be around because Harry's going to pretty much always be around. So, let's see. I did not realize that my window was cropped the best that whole time. I must have accidentally uncropped it whenever I checked earlier. There we go. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Those are just my thoughts on the current meta. Um, and again, I think going by player rate's a little bit better than just saying this card sucks and this card doesn't, because almost every card has a good use in some deck somewhere. So if you guys enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment, sub if you're so inclined. Don't usually do videos like this, so I would appreciate some feedback, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.